So, pranam to all of you and good morning from good midday from here from North Carolina. I'm very happy to see all of you today. So we are meeting again in our 14th lecture on Raga-vartma-candrika. Today we have some sort of preliminary function regarding Sri Krishna Janmashtami. So it's a very nice, auspicious moment having the chance of speaking about this, preparing ourselves for this important celebration on day of tomorrow. So as I said, today is our 14th class, and today we will start with 13th verse number 13 from this first illumination of the Raga-vartma-candrika. We will also continue with verse number 14, first part of it, since it will be quite long. But let's make some brief, or maybe not so brief in this case, I'll try my best, recap of our previous lecture where we were studying still verse number 12. This first part, it was the second lecture we spent speaking about this one, where Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur is speaking about different practices and different goals in the context, of course, of Raga Bhakti. So first of all, he was speaking about for someone in this path, if that person is thinking, remember before that he was warning us regarding certain practices like meditating on Dwarka and worshiping Rukmini. So he continued saying here, if someone in the Raga mark thinks it's not befitting to reject all these duties that are actually prescribed in scripture, so I will follow them, all of them, even if they are contrary to the mood of Raga mark, basically. So Vishwanath concluded saying that person will attain a position as an associate of the queens, Mahishis in Dwarka. And he gave certain praman, certain evidence from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where Sri Rupa Goswami mentioned this same idea. You have a desire for romantic union with God, but you are worshipping Him only through Vaidhi Bhakti, so you will end up in Dwarka. Because if you worship exclusively through Vaidhi Bhakti in the Sri Sampradaya, for example, you may end up in Dasya and Vaikuntha, but romantic desire does not have a place in Vaikuntha, so that has to correspond with some other location or destiny. So that will be Dwarka in this case. So, well, basically he tried to make that clear. You will attain that position. He quoted Amar Kosha Sanskrit dictionary and so on. So on that basis, we spoke about being careful of all those elements that will be unfavorable for the mood we are aspiring for our sadhana bhajan in the Raga mark. And not only, of course, this is not only limited to the Dwarka direction, if you will. And we gave some, if you will, extreme examples and high examples, like the ones of Narottam and Lokanath, like the one of Das Goswami, like the one of Balabhachar and his disciple, where Guru said, if Krishna's deity speaks to you, do not answer, do not open your eyes. Do you remember? Or Lokanath was chastising Narottam for giving water to someone, and that someone was Krishna, so he was showing some inclination towards Krishna in the context of their exclusive pursuit of Radha Dasam, and so on. So our point was, even if compassion or any other thing is harmful for the level in which we are, of course there are different levels of practice and different levels of unfavorable elements. Something may be favorable on one level, unfavorable on another, and so on. So we try to elaborate on that. Then Vishwanath mentioned also, but we cannot suggest that if you worship someone by the mark, you end up with romantic desire, you end up in Dwarka. So maybe you can attain Mathura by mixing Vaidhi with Raga mark, because he said that may give rise to certain questions. For example, if ending in Dwarka implies serving Rukmini and Satyavam, so what does it mean to end up in Mathura? Who will serve you? Who will you serve there? Sorry. So someone may say Kubja. He's like the main feminine figure that appears there in Shastra. So one may say Vishwanath say that's not consistent, because from the rasa vichar, from the point of view of rasa, the position of Kubja, her standing is inferior to that of Rukmini. Sadarani, Rati, and Dwarka Mahishis has Samanjasa Rati. Sadarani Rati was the Rati of Kubja, selfless desire of enjoying with Krishna, basically, exclusively with Krishna in the context of selfless desire. And the queens of Dwarka do not have that type of selfishness at all. So he presents that point. It will be unfair because Kubja has an inferior rati. So also one may question how to reach Mathura in that for. I thought about that because it's not a topic here and we didn't speak about that. But I actually tried to speak with certain Vaishnavas and sadhus, and we were not able to find a way of reaching Mathura. It's not our goal. And actually in the Bhoma Lila, you see that Krishna is in Mathura, but it's just for a moment there. It's like a transitioning place from Vrindavan to Dwarka, even though we hear there is a Golok Mathura in eternity, but there is not any, at least that I know of, any prescribed method to end up there. We already spoke about how to end up in Vrindavan, even different sections that we'll see, or Dwarka, what to speak by Kuntha and so on, but Mathura remains a riddle, at least till now. So after that, also we shared the last part of this 12th verse, where Vishwanath is mentioning in this connection, he presented some Shastra Praman from Gopal Tapani, Shruti, where it seems that it mentioned that in Mathura, Rukmini married with Krishna. So maybe those who somehow or other are able to establish that position, there may be some place for worship of Rukmini in Mathura, something like that. But speaking with Guru Maharaj, some idea like this came. But Vishwanath here is saying that scriptural evidence is not really accepted for all Gaudiya Vaishnavas. But the idea is that, since Rukmini was married in Mathura, according to Gopal Tapani, Krishna resides there with her. So maybe attaining servitorship with Mathura queens will be the fruit of this bhakti mixed with raga. But again, he says that's nothing so consistent because not everyone is accepting that. Also, how can you become associate of Kubja Rukmini if you are worshipping Radha Krishna? Specifically, he's presenting if you are worshipping Radha Krishna, you should end up worshipping Radha Krishna. But the point is, and we mentioned that in that context, if you are worshipping Radha and Krishna, but there is some admixture of Aishwarya, something remains in you about the awareness of the divinity of Sri Hari, you will end up in Vrindavan, but in a particular section in Vrindavan that we called the Golok, in Golok. Now in Golok Vrindavan, we may speak in terms of Golok Vrindavan and Gokul Vrindavan, like a more intimate setting. Of course, I'm not speaking this in terms of three-dimensional distances and geographical places, and you move a little bit physically. There's no physical movements there. All the movements are anubhav. But we may speak in those terms to give a conception. Antar mandal, bahir mandal, that is the inner circle, the outer circle. So these possibilities there in Vrindavan as well. We gave some examples, Brahma praying, Govindam Adipurushan Tamaham Bhajami. Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which has a place on certain level, but on certain level, you need to see him in other terms, like Radha Kanta, Kaneya Lal, as we say, Yashodanandan, and so on. As one more in the village, special one, of course. So, in this way, Vishwanath concluded his point, again quoting this Shruti Smriti Puranadi verse, trying to help us understand the importance of not concocting a whole new process, and whatever has been established here are like the possibilities regarding transcendence. So today we will start with verse number 13, which somehow or other is a continuation of verse number 12 and previous verses, and this will be unpacked also further in verse 14, that we will see not only today, but in some classes. So let's go to verse number 13. I will share the verse with you in the chat. There it is, so I will read it. It's basically an introduction to what will be unpacked in verse 14. So we will mention basically the verse and briefly say something, and then we will go with verse 14. So verse 13, it's saying, in connection with the previous verses, which limbs of bhajan are to be practiced in Raganuga Bhakti? How many types are there? What are their characteristics? What is to be adopted and what is to be rejected? To answer these questions, The scriptures have shown 5 kinds of engagement in bhajan. First, swabhishta bhavamaya, saturated with one's cherished mood. Second, swabhishta bhava sambandhi, related to one's cherished mood. Third, swabhishta bhava anukul, favorable to one's cherished mood. Fourth, swabhishta bhava aviruddha, neutral or not opposed to one's cherished mood. And fifth, swabhishta bhava viruddha, detrimental to one's cherished mood. Some of these 5 categories are both the practice, sadhana, and the goal, sadhya. Some are a direct cause for attaining the goal, prem. Some are its instrumental cause. Some are symptoms of bhajan. Some are helpful. Some are detrimental. And some are neutral. All of these classifications will be explained further on. So here, Vishwanath is trying to, on the basis of what he already mentioned about Raga Bhakti, because he already mentioned, he starts asking what are the limbs of bhajan in Raga Bhakti. He already spoke about that. At least he spoke about the main ones. Remember, quoting these 3 verses from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He already has been speaking about certain things that may be unfavorable to our Raga Bhajan, like worshipping Dwarka and so on, but he presented the idea still in a general way, if you will, in comparison to the unpacking that he will present in the next verse and eventually. So now he further subdivides in order to make things more complex. Remember once Brigu mentioned that Indians love categories and subcategories and so on. So this is one of the instances, not to relativize, of course, the contribution of Vishwanath, but he will further divide the idea in 5 specific points, and we will try to see them. Today we will speak about the first one and the second one mainly, and in the next classes we will try to further unfold whatever implies. But I think you get a glimpse of the idea of these 5 specific categories, those things that are favorable, neutral, unfavorable, connected to one's mood, and representing one's mood, basically. So this idea in this verse 13, apart from the main limbs or angas or some of Raga Bhakti, which were mentioned, as I mentioned, in these 3 verses from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there are also other parts of sadhana. We also know, it's also implied, Rupa Goswami said, I'm giving these 64 angas of bhakti, and most of them can be practices as parts of Raga Bhakti with certain exceptions. So we could say that those certain exceptions were the ones that Vishwanath mentioned in the previous verse. Again, this idea of Dwarka and certain warning about mudras and nyas in certain contexts. So now we have the remaining, if you will, angas of bhakti, which are almost like 60. So in connection to those 60, he won't mention one by one all of them now, but he will mention many of those now on. So he will go in that direction now. And he will also speak about unfavorable things again. But all is this in connection with what Rupa Goswami. We have also to bear in mind how Vishwanath is representing Srila Rupa Goswami at every single step. So he will try to unfold a little bit another possibilities of practices which are to be engaged in Raga Bhakti. So he will explain them, their varieties, their nature, how to be practiced, which are unfavorable and to be renounced and neutral and so on. So he here, after mentioning the 5 of them here, he mentions some of them will represent both sadhana as well as sadhya. So sadhana means the means, and sadhya refers to those things to be attained or the goal, basically. As Narottam Das Thakur mentioned, the only difference will be in this case, the difference will lie in unripeness and ripeness. Unripeness and ripeness. Sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, prem bhakti, if you will. So we will speak about that today also. And some other items will be considered as direct causes for prem. Others will be understood as indirect causes for prem, more direct, more indirect, but somehow or other fitting into the equation of the desired goal. And of course, some will be even worse. They will be considered detrimental or neutral in some cases. So all this we will see in the further classes. So he in this verse number 13, he's just presenting these 5 categories. So now in verse 14, which will be the last one of our first illumination, but also the longest of the whole Raga-vartma-candrika, this verse will unfold all that is contained, condensed in the 13th verse. So this 14th verse will take us some lectures. I don't know how many, let's see, but it's the longest of the book, and it will unpack these 5 divisions Vishwanath presents here. So let's go to verse 14. That will start to unpack. That will unpack totally all this 13th verse. So we will share this 14th verse by different parts connected to these 5 stages that Vishwanath mentioned. So I will just share the very first part, which is a brief mention that he makes connected to the there it is in the chat, connected to the first one, Swabhishta Bhavamaya, or saturated with one cherished mood. This is the first, it's called the first kind of engagement in Raga Bhajan. So this 14th verse will represent a further elaboration on these 5 practices mentioned before. So it says like this, first part, the devotional sentiments of servitude, fraternity, parenthood, and amorous love are called Swabhishta Bhavamaya, saturated with one's cherished mood. So this is what Vishwanath has to say regarding the first of the 5 elements mentioned here, which is called again Swabhishta Bhavamaya. Hopefully you don't get lost in between the terms. The word Swabhishta may be there, it will be there for the 5 of them. You can jump over that if you will. Swabhishta means one's own desired mood, if you will. So Bhavamaya means filled with Bhava, saturated with that desired mood one is having. Swabhishta Bhava. Swa means one, Abhishta means desire, basically, and Bhava means mood. So the mood where is after Mai or Maya means filled with. So after describing this, again, 5 possibilities of engagement in Raga Bhajan in the previous verse, here Vishwanath is starting to elaborate. So he mentions here Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya mainly. These are the Charibhav that Krishna Das also mentions that Mahaprabhu came to give to the world, in the general sense, although generally it is spoken about one main gift he's giving and a second current that is part also of our Gaudiya Sampradayas, in the form of Manjari Bhav, Priyanarma and Sakya respectively. But also in a wider sense, Krishna Das opens the door for these other possibilities by saying Chari Bhav, 4 Bhavs. That's the Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhurya. So the devotional feelings of this are called Swabhishta Bhavamaya, or saturated with one's cherished mood. So these are some of the, how to say, this servanthood, friendship, and other feelings are some of the items, if you will, of bhajan that will be saturated with one cherished feelings. It is described that they are immutable. Anantadas Babaji is mentioned like this. They are immutable both in the stage of accomplishment and practice. So when the sadhaka is attaining perfection, he will achieve the type of bhakti in Braj, in servitude or friendship or whatever that he or she thought during his practice. So that's the point of, they are the same in both practice and the goal. According to the mood you are culturing during sadhana, that you will attain during sadhya. Narottam Das mentions this. Krishna in the Gita says the same. Jam jam bhapishmaram bhavam jayantyantik kalivaram tam tamivaiti kauntiyas sadat bhava bhavitaha. According to the bhava you are culturing, you will attain that bhava. Of course, that verse can be understood that bhava means state of consciousness or emotional situation, but this can be applied also to the bhava you are cherishing in the context of bhakti. So in this sense, Swabhishta Bhavamaya. So according to the time, according to the place, according to your practice, you will attain a particular destiny. This was made clear in our previous classes. We mentioned if you are in the Raga mark officially, but eventually you have another desire, you start to worship Rukmini, you will end up somewhere else. If you are worshiping Radha and Krishna with certain Aishwarya, that will correspond with certain destiny. So according to the way you conduct yourself during your sadhana, there will be a corresponding sadhya. So it's totally common sense. It's not that I conduct myself without any clear conception, but I have hope that at the end of my life, Krishna will appear and send me to the Antarmandal in Golok, in Gokul Golok, if you will. If you really desire that, you will end up there. So we have to exercise our own volition, our own will. So these items of bhajan are considered both the means as the goal. Saturated with one's own desired moods. Again, Svabhishta Bhava Mai. So this Svabhishta Bhava Mai, so we can understand, grasp the idea, is the first element, which could be translated as some specific greed, actual greed for some particular mood. Basically, it has to do with that. That's the first point. You have a greed for some particular mood, and then we will go to the second of these 5 elements, which is Bhava Sambandhi, or Svabhishta Bhava Sambandhi. Bhava Sambandhi means I will engage in those practices which quickly will give that mood. So that there's a connection between the two. One takes to the other. Svabhishta Bhava Mai, it's a particular mode that we have some greed by association, as we have already explained in the previous lectures, and that will take us to Bhava Sambandhi, to those practices connected. Basically, Sambandhi has to do with relationships, so Sambandhi is related to one's Svabhishta Bhava, to one's cherished mood. So this we will see next. As I mentioned, regarding the first one, Svabhishta Bhava Mai, this is what has been mentioned, like establishing this first point. So we will continue today with the next one, and next class also we'll continue with the next one, and maybe some other classes we'll continue with this Svabhishta Bhava Sambandhi. So I will share the next part of this verse 14, speaking about Svabhishta Bhava Sambandhi. I will share that in 2 parts, since this time is considerably longer. So let me see. So that's the first part. I will share the second part. And we will read it. That's the whole thing. It's in 2 parts. So it says like this. Items of bhajan, from taking shelter of the feet of a guru up to mantra japa and meditation, are Svabhishta Bhava Sambandhi, related with one's cherished mood, or related to, I don't know, and are direct causes for attaining the goal, prem. Statements such as always engage in japa with a fixed mind indicate nitya kritya, perpetual duties. The Ganadesh Tipika states that it is one's duty to chant the great mantra comprised of Krishna's names that is associated with one's desired relationship with Krishna, and the japa or kirtan of those names of Krishna that specifically allude to the eternal relationship with him that one aspires for in one's perfected form should be understood to be Bhava Sambandhi. Also, chanting their mantra and having their darshan are known as direct causes, being related with the desired mood. The Ganadesh Dipika describes the meaning of the mantra as follows. The lover of the cowherd ladies pervades all of my senses. This is considered to be the meaning. Therefore, the mantra is powerful in connection with one's desires. Because of this meaning, this 18-syllable or 10-syllable mantra, which refers actually to the Gopal mantra, is said to be the best of all mantras. In conclusion, the sadhana comprised of the hearing and chanting of Sri Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes as appropriately related to one's own cherished mode is also considered a direct cause for attaining one's desired feelings. Thus, it is called Bhava Sambandhi. So again, basically here I feel Vishwanath is just pounding the post with many things that he already established in previous sections, but from a particular perspective, I'm putting that in a particular under a certain label. So I'm saying this just for you not to get confused, but actually I feel he's already speaking about things that he already spoke, but from a particular perspective that make it fit in a more sequential, systematic way. So here he begins by mentioning some different items of bhajan, starting with Guru Padasraya, as following again in the wake of what Srila Rupa Goswami mentions is in the 64 angas of bhakti. The first one is exactly Guru Padasraya. So we see how he's being chased, if you will, to Sri Rupa's description, and he's trying to speak about that now in one way in the context of Raga Marga. And he mentions this after that, no? Taking shelter of the Guru and some other things that implied in that first point, like Guru Tashman Guru Prabhadita, Krishna Dikshadi Sikshanam, Vishrambena Guru Seva, accepting Siksha Diksha from Sri Guru apart from his shelter, serving him, her with deep faith and affection, and engaged in practices like japa, dhyan, meditation. So all of these are considered by Vishwanath as direct causes for the attaining or the attainment of the goal of prem. So in these ways, they are considered bhava sambandhi, related to the desired feelings, to the first division we mentioned, to that saturation of one particular mood. So there are certain practices that will be connected to that mood, nourishing that. So here also he uses the word upadana. Upadana means that which is accepted as the direct cause. Upadana, he will be using two words, upadana and nimitta. So I don't want you, again, to get confused. But he will present, in the context of Bhava Sambandhi, he will speak about something more being more directly related to one's cherished mood and indirectly related, but all in the context of Bhava Sambandhi, this second category. So here the word upadana means, again, refers to those things that are a direct cause for attaining prem. And that's why they are considered related to one's desired feelings. So here Vishwanath, in this section, he quotes, he shares a quote that says, one should always daily practice japa with a fixed mind. That's there in the verse. So in that connection, we can understand always, daily, this is an eternal duty, basically, sometimes considered nitya kritya, as Vishwanath puts that, like perpetual duty. This is something to be done on a daily basis. It's not a mythica or things that's something that you will be doing at some moments only, basically, incidental or something. Also, he quotes another line that speaks about chanting the names of Krishna, chanting the mantra of the names of Krishna connected with the relationship that one desires, basically. That's the context of this idea. When he says chant japa, what does it mean chant japa? Chant the specific names of Krishna connected with your cherished mood, or in the mood of your cherished mood. So he quotes there the Ganodesh Dipika, which is the Radha Krishna Ganodesh Dipika, not the Gaur Ganodesh Dipika, which includes another topic, but Radha Krishna Ganodesh Dipika. So there is in this statement from the Radha Krishna Ganodesh Dipika, it is mentioned that Radha refers to Radha being one's worshipable deity. Remember, Vishwanath is presenting all this in the context of Kamanuga Bhakti mainly. So certain focuses will be more connected in that direction, although we are trying to make it broader, of course, as we mentioned. So the point is, when we see that the sadhakas are practicing japa of the holy names, for example, that will be in connection of the names regarding of those in whose footsteps they are following, basically. So that type of mantra japa is related to the desired feelings as a direct cause. That's the point. No? When he's mentioning here, chanting japa daily, it's not just do that, but do that from a particular way, with a particular orientation, a particular conception. That will be bhava sambandhi. That will really relate to your desired mood. We'll be in connection to that, and we will give the result, the desired result, the desired goal in that connection. So in that connection, Vishwanath next will share some words connected to the Gopal mantra. Because he's speaking about doing japa of mantra, and we may think about chanting Harinam, but mainly he will be referring, in this case, to Diksha mantras and to the main Diksha mantra, which is the Gopal mantra. So he will give an explanation of the quoted verse before, that you should practice japa with a fixed mind. He will elaborate on that, also resorting to the Radha Krishna Ganodesh Deepika, and explaining the Gopal mantra. So he will explain the word Govinda, which is part of the Gopal mantra, Krishnaya, Govindaya, Gopijana Vallabha. So Govinda, he translates according to this Radha Krishna, according to this Deepika, he who pervades all of my senses. That's one of the possible interpretations of the word Govinda. So again, all this he's presenting that in the context of Kamanuga Bhakti, in the context of someone who is in the mood of a gopi, basically offering their senses for Krishna's pleasure. Atmandriya pritibam chutara balikam, Krishnandriya priticha dhare premanam. That is specific feature of Madhurya Bhav, the offering of one's own body, which means senses, for Krishna's sense enjoyment, basically in the context of romantic interaction. Of course, our type of Kamanuga Bhakti has to do with serving the one, the heroine, who is doing that in the topmost way, Sri Radha. But that's a context where he's speaking now. When he says Govinda, Govinda can refer to many things, and someone in Sakya Rasa or with that affinity will understand Govinda in another context, and so on. But in the context of Kamanuga Bhakti, again, Govinda, he who pervades all of my senses. Sri Radha feels like this. That's what it means to be a gopi, actually, in one sense. Gopi has also to do with senses. So gopi also could mean one who protects her senses. Gopi, because gop also has to do with hiding, but also with protecting, and go has to do also with senses. So, and gopal, pal means protection. So gopi is the feminine of that. So a gopi is someone who protects her senses. So how a gopi, or in this case, how Sri Radha protects her senses? By fully offering them for Krishna's satisfaction. That's the best way of protecting our senses, actually. So that's the idea in this context, Govinda, he who pervades all of my senses, and thus, that's the conclusion that we should not reach here, that he's Gopijana Vallabha. He connects Govinda with the next name, Gopijana Vallabha, which is more overtly connected to Madhurya Bhav, to the romantic affairs. In the context, again, in the Gopal mantra, in the context of Kamanuga Bhakti, Govinda and Gopijana Vallabha will be seen as synonymous, basically, for someone with that affinity. Gopijana Vallabha means the beloved of the Gopi people, basically, of the Gopis. So Govinda will refer to that as well, the lover of the cowherd wives, as we'll say, Gopijana Vallabha. So in this way, the Gopal mantra is related to one's desired feelings. Now I gave the explanation in the context of Vishwanath's own Kamanuga Bhakti sensibilities, but this can be applied in any direction. So in that sense, Vishwanath concludes and glorifies, especially the Gopal mantra here. It is ascertained that this is the very best of mantras. Of course, he's speaking here in the context of Diksha mantra. But yes, this is clearly established. Whether it is the version of 18-syllable mantra or 10-syllable mantra, there are two possibilities here. We have the 10-syllable mantra, Klim Krishnaya Namaha. Gopi Jana Vallabha Swaha. That's basically the 10 version, the version of 10 syllables. And they say that the Mahaprabhu received that from Ishvara Puri. And if you add to that Klim Krishnaya Govindaya, the mantra becomes Astadasaksha, which means like 18 syllable instead of the Saksha mantra, 10 syllable. So this is a very recommended mantra, of course. You have the whole Gopal Tapani revolving around that. Guru Maharaj, for certain reason, chose to reveal, interestingly, a commentary to that Shruti very nicely. Guru Maharaj mentioned also how Srila Jiva Goswami recommends this mantra and recommends to sing this mantra in this particular context that we are speaking here, Bhava Sambandhi, related to one's cherished mood. What does Srila Jiva Goswami mentions? You should chant the Gopal mantra with the following, let's say, meditation or intention is, Srila Gurudev has given me this mantra so I may chant it with the hope, with eagerness and hope of becoming a member of the Braj. Of course, still that sounds like an abstract idea, but as your cherished mood becomes more specific, you will project yourself as a specific member of the community in the Braj. So the Gopal mantra, in the connection of what Vishwanath is mentioning here, is consider this type of practices bhava sambandhi, something that are related to one's cherished mood, nourishing that. Finally, Vishwanath concludes this section that I've shared now, by saying also that extending the idea, speaking about japa, but other things, he says that other devotional engagements such as hearing and so on, and Shravan, Kirtan mainly, which again are main practice of Raga Marg, regarding Nam, Rupa, Guna, and Lila. Again, this point is coming, we already spoke about that. Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran, Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila, there is some progression in that. Those who are suitable to one's own feelings, all those are considered as direct causes. Again, this word upadana has to do with that, for the attainment of the goal. And thus they are called related to the desired feelings. Again, bhava sambandhi, the second category, bhava sambandhi. These direct practices of bhakti, we may connect them with the definition of Srila Jiva Goswami of Swarup Siddha Bhakti. These intrinsic devotional activities, main angis like Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran, and so on. So again, but all this, Vishwanath is putting that in the context of related to one's desired feelings. Bhava, swabhishta bhava. One's own desire, cherished mood, sambandhi, in connection to that. For example, again, someone who hankers for Manjari Bhav, continuing with the context of Kamanuga Bhakti, when chanting the names, again, we will prefer to invoke certain specific names of Krishna, or that this is 2 points. If you have some affinity, in this case for Manjari Bhav, you may recite specific names that are connected to that relationship of Krishna as the beloved Radha, or you can invoke names that can be interpreted in that direction, such as Govinda, as we see now. Someone may say Govinda from another background, but someone in Manjari Bhav will take those names in that direction. And whatever is your affinity, that's really powerful. It will have the capacity of putting all these names, whatever, even names of Vishnu, more abstract generic names, will all of them be put in context of their once cherished mood. This has been done in many occasions. Like, for example, if you say Sridhar, Sridhar means it's a name of Vishnu in connection to the sustainer of Sri, of Lakshmi, but also Sridhar, Sri can be a name of Radha, and Dhar can refer to sustain or being sustained. So Krishna is being sustained by Radha, or things like this, or other names. For example, Padmanabha means the one of the whose navel is like a lotus, basically. But some other may refer to Padmanabha, and again in a saturated, having his mind with this saturated with the desired mode in the context of conjugal love. Padmanabha can refer to he who's in his navel has a lotus, and the lotus can refer to, I don't know, Sri Radha's face just resting on Krishna's navel for a moment. So my point is, you will feel yourself, you will have a bias, if you will, a transcendental bias that subjectively will color your vision in a particular direction. So someone who is hankering for a particular mood, as I say, like Manjari Bhav, will prefer those names of Krishna who identify him as a lover of Radha, or will see some other names in that connection. The Krishna's form will be seen in the context of being himself Nayika, the king of the Adi Rasa, of the erotic rasa, if you will, or his qualities, his guna, the ones that will rise on the surface will be like his ones of Dira Lalita Nayaka, being subdued by his beloved, by his sweethearts, and so on. And his lila, what to speak of his lila, of course, will have some affinity and inclination for the lilas between Krishna and Radha and the gopis, and not only any gopis, but the gopis who are in a favorable mood, in a favorable group to one's own cherished desire. So as I say, gradually one will pick those practices or the mood for embracing those practices in such a way that will be related to the nourishing of one's own cherished mood. So all this has to do with the idea of bhava sambandhi. So Let's end with one more part of this 14th verse that Vishwanath is sharing. She shares, as usual, some Shastra Praman. He supports his point by referring this case to the Bhagavad. So there I'm sharing in the chat two verses from the Bhagavad that Vishwanath quotes in this section to further give further strength to his point. So it says like this. In this connection, Srimad Bhagavatam says, one should wander alone, giving up all shyness, and sing songs about Krishna, glorifying the sweetness of his form and names. And all this related to what we have already said, especially at the end. And the second verse, the first one is from 11th canto, 2nd chapter, verse 39. Second verse, 1st canto, 8th chapter, verse 36. All the devotees attain paramount bliss by constantly describing, remembering, and hearing about your character. Of course, this direct referred to Krishna. Vishwanath continues saying, this proofs from Shastra confirmed that continuous engagement in Bhava Sambandhi sadhana or practice related to one's cherished mood is obligatory. Previously, it was discussed that Shmaran is the main limb of sadhana in Raga-nuga bhakti, but even that is dependent on kirtan. In the present age of Kali, it is the practice of kirtan that grants the eligibility to enter into bhajan, Raga bhajan especially. All the scriptures of all devotional paths proclaim that kirtan is the very best limb of bhakti. Shri Harinam Kirtan ki jai. So again, Vishwanath was mentioning before, the sadhaka should engage constantly as a nitya kritya, as a permanent activity, perpetually in Shravan, Kirtan, of Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila, in the context of one cherishment. So here, Vishwanath is sharing some verses to prove how a sadhaka, raga sadhaka should hear without cessation, you say, hear, chant, think, Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran, the Nam, Rupa, Guna, Lila of Sri Krishna. So the first verse, again, we will mention it there briefly, is spoken by Kavi Jogendra. So he's speaking to Maharaj Nimi, in the 11th canto of Bhagavad. So he's mentioning this idea, one should wander alone, giving up all shyness, basically saying like a madman, it will mean this, and sing songs about Krishna, glorifying the sweetness of his form and names. So he's referring about the certain type of kirtan absorbed to such a way that I don't care for the environment. That's a famous verse from the Bhagavad also, that Ishwar Puri quoted to Mahaprabhu. We already shared that, Evam Vratansva Priyanama Kirtyam Jatan Urago Drita Chitta Ucha, and so on, which speaks about the effects of chanting Sri Harinam, ultimately taking us to prem, to madness. Without caring for public opinion. Here is saying the same. Give him up all shyness. It means do not care for what the people say about your so-called madness, and sing songs about Krishna, glorifying the sweetness of his form and name. So this is speaking about certain, concentrating in a specific way in certain direction. And then he shares another verse, which Kunti Devi is actually mentioning, one of the famous prayers of her, Kunti. All the devotees attain supreme paramount bliss by constantly describing, remembering, and hearing about your character. So here Kunti is speaking about the power of Shravan, Kirtan, Shmaran in connection to the guna of Krishna, but of course this is not limited only to guna, to the attributes or character of Sri Hari, but Nam, Rupa, Lila, and so on. So the idea that these quotations are proving that the practices that here Vishwanath is extolling, is describing, which are related again to one's desired feelings, bhava sambandhi, should be continued incessantly. These two verses are speaking about that. Continually, constantly, the words are here, constantly describing, continually doing that. So kirtaniya sadahari, continuous absorption in this. We already mentioned in previous lecture, maybe you remember, that if you are properly absorbed in this main practice of Raga Bhakti, that sometimes we call Angis, You may neglect some of the angas, some of the other practices of bhakti, but you cannot neglect these ones. That's the point. If you neglect certain angas of bhakti as an excuse but we are not you are not following properly the angas of bhakti, that's not proper. That will be harmful for our bhajan. But if you are really absorbed in the angas to the point that it is described in these Bhagavad verses, that's another thing. So after quoting these two Bhagavad verses, we reach this interesting section after Vishwanath establishing how we should continually, obligatory, again, you have to understand what that means, obligatory here, like it's a must. As Guru Maharaj will say, you must have a guru. That Saguru me pabigachet. You must have, not because someone will force you, but the point is, if you do not do that, you cannot expect that the thing will work. So he finishes, Vishwanath, this section with an important point that we already made when we tried to speak about Sadhaka Deha and Siddha Deha and Shmaran and Kirtan, and how Kirtan is supreme, how Kirtan is the most important limb of Raga Bhakti. And we mentioned, eventually Vishwanath will establish that same point. So here is that point where he very clearly, in no uncertain terms, he's mentioning how Kirtan is about Shmaran, how Shmaran depends on Kirtan, and especially in the present age of Kali, Kirtan is the one who gives the adhikar for entering into the depths of Raga Vajan. And he concludes saying this point, that all the scripture glorify this. So, but he mentioned that, he presents some sort of Purva Paksha, if you will. He said, well, it has been said before that the Anga of Shmaran is the most important limb of Raga Nuga Bhajan. We hear that over and over again. However, here Vishwanath is mentioning that even this Anga of Bhajan, Shmaran, is subservient, if you will, to Kirtan. We already again explained that when we spoke about Bhakti Siddhanta's emphasis, Kirtana, Prabhava, Shmarana, Swabhava, and so on. Explaining how Shmaran depends on the purity of heart for one to engage in it. But Kirtan does not. Kirtan enters and starts cleaning, as Guru Maharaj will give the example of the how do you say, broom? You pass the broom gradually. And Kirtan also is coming from from our tongue, the back vocal sense. So it is said that it engages the tongue, but also it also engages the mind and engages the ear, the sense of hearing. So because generally whatever we speak about, or we sing about, and we hear about, we will remember. So that's the logic behind Kirtan will take us to Shmaran. But again, a certain type of Kirtan, a Kirtan endowed with Sambandha Gyan, with Siksha. That's the important point. When we receive Harinam, Sri Guru also will give Siksha, will instruct us as to how to chant, in which direction, in which mood, what to avoid. So all that will take us to a certain type of chanting and hearing that will create a certain type of remembering. So eventually, as we also mentioned, Kirtan will give rise to certain Smaran, will increase the bliss of Smaran, and Smaran will nourish Kirtan, and the two of them will act as cause and effect. Sanatan explained that, Sanatan Goswami, his Brihad Bhagavatamrita. But again, Kirtan is the main limb, especially in Kali Yuga. Srila Jiva Goswami states this in his Bhakti Sandarbha, 273 Anucheda. He says, in Kali Yuga, if you are practicing any other limbs of Bhakti, as we also mentioned, it's obligatory to perform them along with Kirtan. If you follow, we already mentioned, Rupa Goswami says this idea, you can attain perfection through any single limb of Bhakti, Shravan, Kirtan, Shmaram, so on. He gives examples of different devotees. But Jiva Goswami comments, that's true, but in Kali Yuga in particular, like making emphasis in Mahaprabhu's dispensation, all other limbs of Bhakti will give its siddhi or perfection if in connection with Kirtan. So if you are doing Archana, you are invoking the names of the Lord. If you are hearing Harikatha, names of Krishna appear over and over again. So in this way, Harinam is like the active principle in all these other angas as well. So let's share some quotes that speak about this. Especially I wanted to share two verses from Brihad Bhagavatamrita in connection to the superiority of Kirtan above Smaran. So I will share them also in the chat just in case. I will read them for you. So they appear in a similar section, as you can see, second canto, third chapter, and one is verse 148, the other 158. So Sanatana Goswami mentions, we consider that Kirtan is superior to Smaran, because Smaran appears in the heart only, and the heart is flickering and unsteady by nature. For heart, we can say mind. Kirtan, however, directly manifests on the organ of speech and automatically paints the mind with its own hue. In the end, the sound of Kirtan not only satisfies one's own ears, but pleases all those who hear it. So it's all engaging. And the second verse says, among the many types of Sri Krishna Kirtan, the Kirtan of the Lord's name is topmost and supremely worshipful. So now not only the importance of Kirtan is there, but the Nam Kirtan aspect, which is the Yuga Dharma. Through Sri Nam Sankirtan, the supreme wealth of Krishna Prem manifests in the sadhaka's heart very quickly. The Sri Nam Sankirtan is independently capable of bestowing pure love for Krishna, and therefore, compared to Smaran and the other limbs of Bhakti, it is considered the foremost. So in this way, and to further pound his post, Vishwanath concludes. How does he conclude this particular section? He says, in the present age of Kali, it is the practice of Kirtan that grants the eligibility to enter into Vajan. All the scriptures of all devotional paths proclaim that Kirtan is the very best limb of Bhakti. So if you wanted some emphasis, some stress, you have there. So he's making it clear, and he connects that with the age of Kali. So naturally, in connection to that, we are lent to think about Nam Kirtan, which is the specific form of Kirtan so recommended by Mahaprabhu in this age, Nam Kirtan. And that's over and over again stated in the scripture. Whatever you attain in Satya Yuga by meditation, in Treta Yuga by sacrifice, in Dwapara Yuga by worship of the deity, all of this is attained in Kali only by Nam Kirtan, says the Bhagavad. Kalir dosha nide raja asti hi eka mahaguna kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sangha param bhajit. Many verses, especially in the last canto of the Bhagavad, 12th canto, which speaks about the age of Kali, the Bhagavatam describes the terrible condition of Kali, but at the same time glorifies Kali in the context of Yuga Dharma, Mahaprabhu's gift, according to our Goswami, saying things like Kalim Sabhajanti Aryan. The Aryans, those people who know about the highest values of life are worshipping the age of Kali, are praying to be born here so they can participate in the Yuga Dharma of this age, which is so generous. And this is the contrast that the Bhagavatam gives. Kalir dosa nide raja asti ekam. Kali Yuga is like an ocean of faults. Kalir dosha nide. It's an ocean of defects. Everyone, whatever you see, is doing some misdeed. Asti ki eka mahaguna. But there is one big quality, mahaguna, in this age. It's so big that it can counteract that whole ocean of defects. And which is that one? Kirtana Deva Krishnasya. But only by engaging in Krishna Kirtan, what will happen? Mukta Sangha Param Brajat. You will get free from all attachment, all mundane environments, and Param Brajat. You will go to the Param, to the supreme goal of life. And of course, again, this is what Mahaprabhu is coming to give. Jayanti hi Sumedha Saha. Krishna Varnam to Saha Krishna. Those who have Sumedha Saha, who has some refined theistic intelligence blessed by Bhakti Sukriti, will be able to take advantage of the Dharma of Kali and engage in this way in Harinam Sankirtan, understanding this is the most effective means, not only to attain liberation, but to attain the specific goal of Prem that Mahaprabhu is coming to give, which is in the context of this Raga Marga culture. And so here's what Vishwanath is mentioning is this. We are speaking about Raga Bhakti, and we are speaking in the concept of Bhava Sambandhi, Swabhishta Bhava Sambandhi, those practices which are related to one's cherished mood. So he ends up this section by extolling the glories of Sri Kirtan, Sri Harinam Sankirtan, as the most powerful and important anga of Raga Nuga Bhakti. So I will finish here. And next class, next Thursday, we'll continue with this verse 14 and other varieties of Swabhishta Bhava Sambandhi, of this same second category of related to one's cherished mood in connection to this verse. So I'll finish here, and of course, if you have any questions, any comments, we have some minutes left.
Maharaj Dandavats, I have a question.
Yes, Rigo.
This 13th text, which mentions these 5 different types of bhajana, what makes it kind of complicated, of course, is that there's not only these 5, then there's also that among these 5, some can be sadhya or sadhana, some can be direct cause of attaining the goal, and some can be the instrumental cause. And then also and so forth. So we heard about Bhava Sambandhi, Svabhishta Bhava Maya, and how some things are both sadhana and sadhya, like, for example, dasya and sakya. But is Vishwanath saying that some things, like, for example, mantra japa, that they are Svabhishta Bhava Maya, but they are only sadhana, they are not sadhya? Is that the point?
I mean, you are asking that?
Yes.
Well, what he's saying regarding your specific question, as I mentioned, as it says in the mantra, it says, this practice are nitya kritya. For example, it says statements such as always engage in japa with a fixed mind indicate nitya kritya or perpetual duties. So in that sense, of course, you could say, if you want to take that as, what does it mean in the context of sadhya and sadhana? Of course, in one sense, regarding your sadhana, you could say, of course, that mantra japa is a perpetual duty in the context of being a sadhaka. I mean, it's not something that, okay, I may chant my mantra today, maybe not tomorrow, no? But if we want to speak in terms of sadhya, so it's a perpetual duty to chant my mantra japa while arriving already to my sadhya. Well, depends on which sadhya, in the sense that we are, as Gaudiyas, we have twofold sadhya in the form of Golok Vrindavan and Nitya Navadip. So in the context of Nitya Navadip, we will still be sadhakas, but in perfected stage. So, but the mood of the lila is sadhana. So there will be a part for that. But of course, we know that in the Golok, generally that's not the case. No, in Golok Vrindavan, Gopis are not chanting, doing japa of Gopal mantra or so on, because Gopal is already there, if you will, the very personification, the very deity of the mantra. They have there in front of their eyes, and they are serving him directly and so on. While in Gaur Lila, of course, also the very object of the mantra is there in the form of Mahaprabhu, but again, the mood of the Nitya Navadip is that of sadhana. So in that sense, we could extend the mantra japa into eternity in the context of Nitya Navadip, but not connected to Golok Vrindavan. So I don't know if that answers your question. Okay. But again, till we do not arrive there, till we do not get sadhya and we are in sadhana, of course, this is the main point here, no? That it's a perpetual duty and most important practice in connection to the attainment, because he's speaking about the attainment of the desired goal. So he concludes, I'm speaking this for those who have not reached there yet. So how to conduct ourselves if we are trying to go into that direction of our cherished mood. Okay, any other question?
Maharaj?
Who is there? Kanamrita Prabhu, Jai.
Hare Krishna. Just as you know, kirtan is very popular, and it seems like it's emphasized, but not so much Sambandhigyan. A lot of people like to chant, do kirtan. They don't necessarily are well schooled in Sambandha. What about them? As far as
what about them? Their destiny?
Well, we can't say that, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, recently, the other day, Guru Maharaj gave a nice lecture because this last weekend we had some uh, online Japa retreat in Spanish mainly. But I think some of you, I think Saragrahi was connected there, Sumati as well, for Guru Maharaj's lecture. So he spoke about Nama Parad, Nama Bas, and Sudanam. So he emphasized a lot regarding Nama Parad, that in big part, the idea of, because you one devotee may go neurotic about, I want to avoid Nama Parad, but he mentioned, if Guru is giving you Nam or mantra, and accompanying that with proper Sambandha Gyan, Diksha, which includes the offenses to avoid, how to avoid them, and so on, you shouldn't be worried about Nama Parad because you are receiving the real perimeter or context, the circle of protection in which you can engage in kirtan and not make it something else. So, but yeah, the point is that Sambandha Gyan is, I remember Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur mentioning once, there are two types of kirtan, Krishna kirtan and Maya kirtan, he said. So you have to be aware of what's being promoted, no, in the name of Harinam, because externally chanting is there, Harinam is there, but it can be Namaparad, it can be Namabas, according to what Bhaktivinoda Thakur considers Shraddha Namabas, it can be Shuddhanam. No? So people may be chanting just only to get followers. That can happen, to get fame, to get position. Some other can be just engaging in kirtan for musical entertainment, for delightful experience, like in heavenly planets. So that mridanga, that other one. And some others are really wanting to serve Srinam, engaging in Nam Seva. And that's the real meaning for us of Kirtan or Sankirtan. When we say Sankirtan, Sam, the word Sam, what does it mean Sam? Samyak Kirtan. So Samyak means full Kirtan, complete Kirtan. And of course, sometimes we translate in quantitatively. Now that means full Kirtan means many people, no, congregational chanting. And of course, that's one side of the Samyak equation, Sankirtan. But Sankirtan means full in number, full in quality. So Samyak Kirtan, full Kirtan means I'm trying to make a full offering of myself. In the Kirtan, I'm trying to renounce my, what Sanskrit called pritak bhava, which means like the independent selfhood, my sense of being independent from my source. If I'm engaging in Kirtan from a sense of self that I am the center, I'm the chanter of the Kirtan, that's not real Sankirtan. And the idea of Sankirtan is we get together, so we help each other with that idea in mind. So nobody can forget what's the real goal of this. That's cooperation, cooperation Kirtan. That's the beginning of love, as sometimes we say. No? The opposite, we are in the age of Kali, which is mainly characterized by fear and hate. The opposite of that is love, and the beginning of love is cooperation, we may say. So Sankirtan is cooperation. We will get together to cooperate, but that means all of us will try to leave aside one's own separate sense of self, this pritak bhava or purusha bhava, and we will try to offer our ego in the fire of Sankirtan. But as much as we are doing that, we are really participating in Krishna Kirtan. It's not black and white. You are in the Kirtan, you are not in the Kirtan, you are in Krishna Kirtan, you are in Maya Kirtan. No? There are shades of gray, but my point regarding your question is that Sambandha Gyan is crucial for us to understand how to conduct ourselves in Kirtan, because if not, we may be taken by the waves. Who knows which waves, no? Who knows in which beach we will end up surfing, no? The waves of Kanaka, Kamini, Pratishta, all that can happen in the name of Kirtan. So yeah, it's crucial to have Sambandha Gyan, and I like to engage in Sankirtan and get together with the devotees and just chant. But I also consider important that that's good if you are really receiving Sambandha Gyan in between. I mean, you may get together and sing for 8 hours, no problem, but hopefully after those 8 hours, you will have 8 hours of Sambandha Gyan and Siksha to compensate. Or 4 hours Kirtan, 4 hours Sambandha Gyan, something like, not just 18 hours of Kirtan and 15 minutes of Sambandha Gyan and 18 hours of Kirtan again. That's, I mean, it's not a number again, but my point is we should be interested in knowing what's this all about. And that's not so easy again, because that's ego effacing practice actually. I mean, actually our practice ego effacing. So we need to allow ourselves to be like the famous Draupadi example. No? She's just like getting naked. No? So that means to enter into the fire of Sankirtan. They will take away all your sari. No? If you will, you will be naked. And in that context, you will raise your hand and fully surrender yourself to your shelter. That's what has to be happening in Kirtan internally. So yeah, Sambandha Gyan, as you know, it's crucial for, and it's a culture, because it's acquiring some scars, acquiring impressions, developed by an identification with the ideal. It doesn't happen from one day to another. It's not that I hear this one day in one class. Okay, I understand. Now I will do Sankirtan. We need to constantly include these ideas, because we have been including so many other opposite ideas for eons. So now we need some ongoing repetition of something that is actually always new also. So thank you for the question and invitation to touch that important point connected to here. So something else before finishing? One last question maybe?
Jai Maharaj, Dandavad, it's Omkar Das.
Jai Omkar. Yes.
Just a quick question, I suppose, hopefully. I was discussing with a devotee the other day about just how to get a cherished mood. And I was saying I've been always tracked Sakyaras and asking if he has one affinity to a specific type of relationship. And he seemed to think that it's a very high thing and one shouldn't really fabricate this mood, but it's something that's slowly going to come, and it's a very very sort of high concept. So it's just sort of made me think that how high is it, and am I faking it, or am I just actually like acquired this mood because I've had it for a while and even before my shiksha. So what do you have any opinion or anything to say about that?
Well, as you know, we do not come with a mood already from the factory, if you will. No? It's not inherent in us a particular mood that will create this a whole list of theological problems, but that's another thing. I won't enter into the details of that. I'm writing on that, so I'm tempted to elaborate on that for hours, but my point is, I will say that if we speak about mood, entering into certain mood, how much we should open ourselves for mood, I would say that our mood is already established from day one, as Maharaj always make this point. Like someone asks you, did your guru gave you some rasa or some identities? He said, yes, that's your rasa for Mahaprabhu Nityanavadi. That's the most immediate and safe place to be. And we really need to understand this point. This is not something to digest quickly. I mean, we have to really establish ourselves as dasas, as servants. We really have to grasp all the implications of being a servant. I mean, that's not so quick and so easy. And by doing that in the context of servants, of other servants, of servanthood, naturally we will be sprinkled, if you will, with a certain type of servanthood that we may not even be aware of in the beginning. And it doesn't matter in one point. I mean, it's not that you have to have already fixed in your mind, which is your specific projection in Raj. That will come gradually as we properly get clear which is our specific projection in Navadvip. And Navadvip, I mean now, as a sadhakas, we are now part of the Sankirtan Leela of Mahaprabhu. Gaur Leela is here now for us in the context of serving Guru and Vaishnava. So by fully embracing the opportunity that is being given to us as servants, as engaging in Vaishnava Seva, this is a very important concept, Vaishnava Seva. What does it take to engage in Vaishnava Seva? It's not just doing something externally for the sadhu, but adjusting my inner self in such a way that it's pleasurable for the sadhu, because I want that, not because of some like dysfunctional case of codependence. No, like I'm surrendering myself to someone and all day serving the other person, but only because I have some existential hole in my heart and I want that person to fit that, and actually I'm using the other one for serving me. That's not surrender. That's not Saranagati. You know, so even though it may seem similar, the idea of Uttam Bhakti, no desires, no separate interests, and codependence, externally seems similar, but when you go to the inner motivating factor, it's a whole world of difference. So we should enter into the mood of servanthood, understanding I'm here to serve everything and everyone, and nobody's here to serve me, actually. That should be but I should reach that conclusion in a healthy way, in a happy way, in a sustainable way. So that may take some time. But in the context of that, you are receiving the Sangha, the association of higher Vaishnavas. You should remain in that circle. So that will come to you as a samskar. In the beginning, maybe ajnata, if you will, samskar, you are not aware of that, but eventually some specific affinity will come in the context of Vrindavan. But first, again, we have to develop affinity for being a Saranagata. We should have a taste with the prospect of surrender. If that's not tasty for us, I mean, our jumping or our rushing into Vrindavan will be just some escape from the task at hand now as sadhakas. So as Guru Maharaj will say over and over again, if you take full advantage of your sadhaka deha, siddha deha will come as a natural byproduct of that. You don't have to think separately in that direction. So I will say that, so we are not just like diverting in our mind and thinking, oh, what will be my affinity, how to we should enter into the mood of surrender, of having a taste for giving pleasure to all the object of our affection, but that in a healthy way. So for that, each one of us has to consider many things. It has to be introspective, has to think internally, has to be able to look at what's going on inside of our hearts. And sometimes that means having to have darshan. Before having darshan of Krishna, we'll have darshan of of the garbage that may still be there, not allowing us to see Krishna. That's what Kunti is saying. Vipadasan tutasat vatatra tatra jagat guru apunarbhava darshana, which is what third line disappeared. But the point is, she's saying, he's praying to Krishna, send me obstacles, send me problems, because in those moments, I can know who I am. I can know where I'm standing. If everything is okay, everything is joyfully and jolly, most probably I'm not aware of the real situation, state of affairs. But when some problem is coming, problem in a healthy way, some challenge is coming, I have the opportunity of seeing who I am. And by seeing that things that most probably include seeing some garbage in between, eventually by fully recognizing that, working on that, I will see you. By having that first darshan that may be not so sweet, eventually I will reach the sweetest of darshans, the darshan of Sri Hari. But we should understand this implies sincerity. And sincerity is invincible, as Krishna will say, but sometimes it's not so easy to be sincere for us. So it's not so easy to be invincible, and that's why we feel ourselves defeated so many times yet. Because certain lack of sincerity, certain lack of willing to face certain facts in our life. Because we like to see ourselves, I'm doing things nice, I'm a good devotee, I'm a Vaishnava, everything's okay, but sometimes it's not like that. So we need to allow that to happen in the context of our devotional project in a positive way. So that all this will help with our cherished mood. Because even if we go to Vrindavan, the background of Vrindavan, all of the Brajavasis are fully situated in Saranagati. As Maharaj will say, that's the stage on which the drama of the Leela is performed. So we should build the stage first. Because if we call the actors and we want to jump in the stage, without the stage being there, the play will be a tragedy. And interestingly, in Indian drama, tragedy is not considered as part of that. They have comedy and so many other rasas, but tragedy is not considered because ultimately everything is in the concept of Leela. But we need education in that direction. So some ideas. I don't want to extend further. So I hope that helps. And thank you all of you for your presence and your time. And hopefully see you tomorrow for Sri Krishna Janmashtami class, and the day after tomorrow for Srila Prabhupada's Sabir Bab lecture from Guru Maharaj also. And on Thursday, we will see again each other for our next class regarding Sri Raga-vartma-candrika. Srila Gurudev ki jai, Sriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Sri Raga-vartma-candrika ki jai, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Bo, Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Hari Bo.